Hi, everybody. Welcome back to No Code North. Welcome back to the Lodge. We are here today to learn about accessibility. I think we all know that accessibility is important not just for uh, things like SEO, which sometimes people think that's mostly what it's for, but really, accessibility is for the people who need assistance when they're visiting a website to make sure that they can understand the content that's on the website. So, today we've got our resident accessibility guru that we all turn to when we need to know more about accessibility in Webflow, Jeremy Leroux, who's also one of the co-founders of No Code North. And Jeremy is going to take us through a series of parts of Webflow and how to make them accessible. So welcome, Jeremy. Hello, good to see you.
Hi everyone. It's great to be here and totally nerd out about something that I'm quite interested in and have been exploring it for a while, specifically in terms of Webflow, which actually is, I guess even though it's specifically for Webflow, it's because Webflow uses HTML, CSS, and JavaScript as the underpinnings of everything. It allows us to be really accessible if we just use things that are available to us in Webflow. So today, I'm just going to try to demystify some of that. So first off, I'm just going to grab my screen here. And for those who don't know me, I am a Webflow and visual developer, low-code developer. So I do a lot of the backend type stuff. I do Webflow development from Figma designs. There are a ton of great designers I can work with, and so I like that. I like working and making the Webflow sites as opposed to designing them because that's not my forte. But enough about me. I'm pretty easy to find everywhere. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn or drop a line on from my site and go check things out here. But I don't want to waste too much time on that. I want to dive right in. And so, um, actually, if we can toss in, actually, I will do that right now in the chat here. I'm going to just toss this link in. Address. I'm just going to toss it into the chat right now. And you can follow along and get the clonable or follow along with me here as we dive in. So the first thing I want to do is I've already created this site. So I'm really just going to go through parts of it already. I was going to create slides and I realized that wasn't really a thing that had to happen. And so we're going to kind of go through a lot of different things and trying to in an order that kind of makes sense for things. And so the first place I want to start is I really want to start talking about when the thinking about accessibility needs to start. And that is right at the beginning. And we want to design with accessibility in mind. So it's not an afterthought. It's something that we are consciously putting into plan of action. And as a developer, that sometimes means like having those conversations with the designers early and being like, okay, so what are the components that we're going to be using, the fonts, the colors, and things like that. And so we want to be making these choices in a smart way. And one of the first things when we come to design, we're talking about brand, we're always talking about fonts and colors. And so we want to talk about legibility when we're talking about typography. And it has to do with the particular glyphs that can be correctly identified. It has to do with readability. So it's kind of an all-encompassing thing. And instead of like looking at it as this like, okay, this is this specific this is this specific thing, it's kind of an overall because I'm not trying to complicate things. I just want to like bring to the forefront the fact that we want to talk about how these things affect right from the design, how these things are going to affect how people are able to use the site. And so Google has a great resource on accessibility for fonts, and part of it is like this readability. I'm just gonna zoom in here a little bit, and it's the differentiation between either letters that go side by side or are hard if people have ability, hard time differentiating between the different shapes and stuff like that. So these are kind of common things to be looking at: the QP, DB, the zeros and the O's, and being as legible as we can with just those kind of things. The other thing that we want to be doing, and you kind of see it in action here, is we want to be using relative units. So we're not using pixels for text size and spacing or any of that kind of stuff. We want to use relative units. So we're going to be using things like rem. I personally use rem. I find m's a little bit harder to understand for me personally, because it's, if you get a container that's wrapped in an M and another one M inside of it, there's math involved, and I want to stay pretty much far away from that. So I use rem, and rem is basically dividing one rem equals 16 pixels. So it's a quite easy math. And so one of the things that I'll look at, and one of the things that you want to be knowing is that with accessibility, nothing should be less, that you actually want people to read should be less than one rem. Like that, straight across the board. Don't make your fonts less than your type less than one rem. If you really want people to be able to use it. But the other reason we use rem is because of this. So I'm just going to increase the size of my text here and up to 200%. And this should all be legible, and things should flow, and so that when people do want to zoom in this much, it doesn't make things overlap. And this is something that's really important, is because a lot of people who do have issues seeing things visually on the screen may want to increase the size. Or the thing to think about with accessibility is there's people who have permanent disabilities that prevent stuff. We have environmental things, conditions, like if somebody is doing something on a very light, they're outside and they're trying to read on a laptop or something like that, and the sun is shining, then they're going to have a hard time picking up these things. Disability, it can be a temporary thing as well, because it could be somebody that has an injury or something. So there's all of this encompassing thought about the way that we should be looking at accessibility. And what it basically means is we want more people to be able to use the sites and understand them using whatever assistive devices or not assistive devices they're using. And so we want everybody to kind of have that experience and be able to really clearly understand what everything is about. And so that's where the thinking is with all of this. We're just trying to get more people to be able to use our sites. And Webflow, like I said, does actually make it quite easy. So the other thing that we want to look at is color. And I'm just going to go back to, oh, I'm going the wrong way. Live is always fun. So Webflow and now Figma has the ability to do this color, and it's an important conversation to have again with the design, is because we want to make sure that we're following accessibility ratings. And AA is generally what most people are going for, unless you have a requirement that requires you to do AAA rating for accessibility. Then you're going to need to be a lot more strict with what the requirements are. We're, for the most part, because I do not want to get super complicated, we're going to be talking about like the level of a AA accessibility for most things, and what's going to not only just give you great lighthouse scores, but is actually going to make a difference in the usability of sites. And so that is one of the things we're going to concentrate on. So let's just take a look at one of the things that Webflow gets built in. I'm actually going to create a color block, because let's go Control D if I just want it doesn't really matter. Let's just go color. So I can get rid of this later, test color. And so I want to use, and I want to do a text, Control A, give, no text. This is why I don't do live. So it makes me incredibly nervous. So I'm going to just pick a, actually I need to pick an actual color here. Let's just go with something that's not super harsh on the eyes. And then what we want to do is I want to, where is the, help me out here. Is it here? No. I had this yesterday. Where's the color tester? Oh, text block maybe. Is it text?
I don't know, or did they move it to the variables? I'm not sure because I kind of.
I saw it yesterday, so where did it go? If I go here, I don't see the rating anymore. Oh, that's why. Thank you. And this is why it's helpful to have people that are paying attention to what I'm doing. There we go. So here's the Webflow makes it super. Yeah, there we go. We can zoom in there a little bit. Can't really see that though. Let me just zoom out. Here, so we can tell what our rating is based on this. Now, Figma again has actually a very similar thing. If I've popped in our designs here, and so if we go into Figma, I was doing this yesterday to try to figure out exactly what it is. But if you go into custom, you can see that this line up here is actually the first level of accessibility. Once it crosses, so anything above this is accessible. Then we actually get into here where you can see, again, it's the AA or AAA rating. And then you get further into here and you can see that if you change the color, what the rating is. And in Figma, they also even have it so you can set in your settings, I think, you can set where the, you can set where you need to meet the requirements. So it's a lot stricter if you're going for AAA and what the color has to be for whatever it is, and you just need to be aware of that. But for the most part, I think most people are going to be using the AA, and so these are guidelines. It'll help you distinguish what actually is accessible and what's not. The other thing to think about with color is we use background images a lot, and so one of the things that we have to be really careful of background images, especially when they're dynamic, is we want to be making sure that the color of the background image, as much as possible, we want to be as accessible with that. It's a little bit harder. What I like to do with when we're talking about color is we want to be using whatever kind of the closest color to our text is going to be, and bounce it off of that and check to see, is this an accessible thing? Because if the text goes over top of that, can people read it? And so we'll use overlays and things like that. And if we're going to be using text, we should be using it on a background with an overlay. We should still be really mindful of using large text. And I have an example of that a little bit later on in one of the demos that I have here. The other note with color is it should never be the single indicator, because people that have color blindness issues or have a hard time differentiating between different colors, if it's only the color that changes, then people may not be able to recognize it. So for instance, in forms or something like that, oftentimes people might have like a red for an error or something like that. And so we really want to provide error messages or something that gives an indication of why something isn't working. So not just a single color thing. Or another example of that would be sometimes people are like, oh, fill in this box if it's this color, and in forms and stuff like that. Again, we actually use like an asterisk so that people can recognize this is a required a field to be filled out in the form. So we give other indicators other than just color. Same thing with buttons and things like that, because we need people that, again, have a hard time distinguishing between colors to understand what's happening. So we'll use outlines, or we'll use thicker borders or different things to be able to tell somebody when they need to take an action or do something. The last thing I wanted to touch on when we're into the design is I want to talk a little bit about motion, because we have the ability to create these beautiful, really vibrant things moving, and some people take it, in my opinion, animation to like the next level and maybe a little too much, but we want to be thinking about that experience. And so we want to be talking to the designers and being like, how much motion is actually required for this? How much is going to be too distracting? If there's blinking or something like that, we need to be careful, because people can have an adverse reaction to that. So there is some specific guidelines. And without going into all of the weeds, because there is a lot when it comes to accessibility, there's a ton here to be able to go forward and learn more about it. And there's lots of tools that we can use to do that. And I encourage you to go, and if you're curious about something, then go check it out and see what the requirements are for something if you want to use something. The other thing I found was this great script here that prefers, basically, when we have options for a web browser, and one of the options is to prefers reduce motion. And so that means the user doesn't really want a ton of motion. And so this one ends up happening. There's this link here, and it goes to a script that, let me just pull this one up here, by Koalati. And it's a full script on basically taking out the animation when somebody has preferred reduced motion. So it takes out all of the Webflow IX animations right off the bat there. So, and then we go here, and yeah, and so he's got the example of what this looks like. There's other ways of doing preferred reduced motion in CSS. You can adjust things. There's different ways of tackling it. Again, because of how big this topic is, I can't go into everything in grand detail, and so I'm really trying to just kind of impart a little bit of this kind of specific or this kind of general kind of information. And I encourage you to go find out more information, because there is, again, it's a very broad topic. So as far as like, that's the kind of first bit. Patrick, if you change the text size of your body's base text, example, will one rem, because the 16 pixels should be the base. So as far as like meeting the guidelines, you do not want to be below 16 pixels for things that are readable text. That's that. If you go into like the accessibility guidelines, that is what they say. And then it's 1.5 rem, I think, for large text. So there's definitely specific guidelines or things to pass. Yeah, Maggie, exactly. GSAP Match Media, which I haven't had any time to explore, is another one that allows you to do reduce motion right within GSAP. So I'm sure that there'll be more information, hopefully with Webflow coming out with the GSAP integration, that a lot of that is going to be kind of inherent in what we talk about. I wanted to quickly go over this because I think most people are aware of the images and alt text. And let me just do a... And one of the things that Webflow has actually available to us is it gives us this audit, which I don't know if you're aware of, but down in the bottom here, we have the ability to do there's specific audits that Webflow does on its own, and it can tell you if you're missing alt text in something, and non-descriptive link content and all of these kind of things. And so these are kind of like base level things that you're going to definitely want to do. Now with alt text, what we want is for any kind of image that we want to have a descriptive text for what that image is, if it's relevant and important to relay that information. In some cases, we may have flourishes on the page or something like that that don't require alt text. And actually, and this is kind of one of the important things when we're thinking about all of these kind of rules or recommendations, is we want to start thinking about how it impacts the user when they're using assistive devices like a screen reader or something along those lines, where we want to be mindful of what the information we're trying to relay. So in some cases, alt text with a description is the answer, and in some cases where we don't want a flourish on a page to be announced, we want to set that to decorative. So in Webflow, right from the assets panel, we can go in, and in the settings themselves, we can make the choice whether the alt text is going to be descriptive or decorative. And if we're using descriptive, then we want to explain what the image is for somebody that cannot see the image. It also is a great fallback if an image doesn't load. And also for SEO purposes, we want to add in, we can add in keywords and things that we want to maybe rank for SEO as well. It's another way of we don't want to keyword stuff here, but we can use things that make sense, and that will help ranking as well. But if SEO even flags alt text missing as something, the other way that we can do this is, I don't know if I have any examples of it, or if it's done in here, so forgive me, because if I am not using it, it may not be here. But in our CMS, probably don't, so this is probably going to be my bad. Yeah, so for these images here, I think I just got Webflow to create this. For this image here, let's just do it right now. So I'm going to go in, and I want to have just text available, and I want to just toss in alt text, and let's go main image alt text. That way, I provided the ability for the client to be able to, have their image and then have the alt text behind it, so that it's not something that they even have to think about. The other way that this is done in Webflow is you have multi-image fields. And so I'll just go multi-image. And when we put in multi-image fields, so for instance, if we go, let's just save this real quick. If we go into our CMS, and where did I just put the multi-image field? Did I not add it to the right thing? Oh, maybe it didn't save it. Multi-image, save collection. Okay, I've saved and saved. This is live, people. All right, so we've got our main image alt text. Now we have a multi-image field. Yeah, tons of pictures of me. That's great. But what I wanted to show was this. So in the multi-image field, you can edit the alt text right here. So this is the important thing to be aware of, that, and to also guide the client, is if they're filling in the CMS, this is where you add the alt text for multi-image fields, and and then it gets picked up. If you don't add the alt text, then there is no alt text for that image. So hopefully that clears that up. I know I'm flying through this stuff because I think most people probably know about alt text. And the important thing, again, is to describe what it does. But so, for instance, where you might not be using alt text is on a card where it's going to a link, because you're not going to be describing that alt text. Like, you don't want, when somebody's clicking on the link, you don't want the description of the image. What it's doing is, in that card or whatever, is it's sending somebody to a link or something like that, and that is the important information, not the image that's being used as kind of a decorative thing. So that is kind of one of the little things when we're thinking about it, is like, what are we actually trying to convey to people with alt text? And that's where we can, use the descriptive text, or not have it there. Any questions so far? The other thing is, like, if I'm going too fast, jump in, ask questions or whatnot. So otherwise, thumbs up. Are we good to move on? Yeah, awesome. Alrighty, so let me just pop in. Okay, so now we're getting into the meat and potatoes of things. I want to talk about the accessibility tree. And so I am a PC user and Chrome, so this is what I'm going to be explaining it on. You may have to figure out how to find the accessibility tree in your web browser of choice. But in Chrome, when we go into our developer tools, if we go into this tab called accessibility, and we click in this enable, let me just zoom in here. I think I can zoom in a bit. We want to enable the full page accessibility tree. The one thing we have to remember is we're going to want to reload our dev tools. And then what we're going to be able to see in the top corner is this accessibility icon person. And when we do that, it's going to give us a completely kind of different view of things. So it's going to give us links, and we're going to see structure of different things depending on what's on the page. And this is a really good way of just initially looking at some of the things that we might have. So and then everything that is in this page, or in this tree, it can be seen by accessibility tools. So this is how we can kind of check to see if we're, having the right information for people that are using assistive devices, because this will tell us if this is in the accessibility tree and available to those assistive devices. So that's the first thing. So we've accessed our accessibility tree. And so that's kind of our first test, and we can see things like banners and links, and we can see navigation and lists, and we can see different landmarks and the information behind them. And so this next piece, when we're going through, let's just see, where am I headed next? Maybe we should do this. Yeah, let's go to the skip link. So one of the things that on most websites we'll have a navbar, and we'll have, let me just jump over to the skip link page. We'll have a navbar, and then we'll have information underneath it. And sometimes people just want to get to whatever the main information is. And so one of the ways we do this is we put the first it's keyboard focusable link is actually a skip link. And so What that does is when somebody goes to the page for the first time, if they basically are using their keyboard, the first thing that's going to pop up if they hit tab with their keyboard is it's going to be their skip to main content. And so when we click that, it's going to focus us right into the main content. It's going to be skipping any of the information in our Navbar, our menus, because there could be huge amount of information in the menus, and that can be confusing to people or how to navigate through it, and maybe they don't want to. So this takes them right to the main content. And so in Webflow, the way we do that is we create a skip link. Now I've got it in a component here in the header, and a shout out to Corey Moen, because I was going through Mast yesterday because I was creating this component probably in a more complicated way, as I tend to do sometimes. And I realized that the way that he has it implemented in the Mast framework is the smart way of doing it, as far as creating a component with it. And what that is we want to do a few things. So let's just go to the styles of a skip link. So you may want to be doing this in the focus keyboard state to begin with, because that's going to show you what your skip link looks like on the page. So if you go to focus keyboard first, and then you can design your skip link however you want. So one thing we want is we're going to have this positioned absolute. It's going to be the first link on our site. And so we want it positioned absolute. Here I've got it 2% from the side and 14%, and it's above all of the content. So the Z index here is high above everything else as well. Again, for this particular thing, when we're in the focus keyboard state, we want to just set up our width and any of the information, however we want this to look, we do this all within the focus keyboard state. And then what we do, the other thing is, some people might use CSS for this. That is originally where I learned about skip to main, or skip link is. It was through CSS and learning how to hide things and then make them focusable. But because we're using Webflow, we have the ability to just do this right within the tool itself. And the one thing I really like about this is once you've created this skip link, you can copy this skip link to every single one of your projects. You just take it, you've done it once, and you now have a skip link. And you can literally drop it in on any project, or you can create a component of it and drop it into any project you like. And so that it's all done for you already. So there's no second guessing. And once you do this once, I'm a big fan of not reinventing the wheel, not doing something a million times, just kind of creating these processes where you're like, oh, okay, I have that component, I know where it is, I'm just going to go shove it in this project. And it's really simple. Then you can put it on every single page, and it automatically is going to do what you want it to do. So the other thing to want to keep in mind here is we're going to want to set our focus keyboard state to events auto. Now, I'm going to drop back to the none state. And once we go here, this is really the important part of where we want this to go. So we need this to be display inline block. Now, a lot of people will be like, well, I just want to hide it. And so your tendency might be to go to just have it as a none for the initial state. The problem with this is if it's none, then it won't be tabbable. So when a user clicks tab, they won't get that skip link immediately. So we want to make sure we set this to inline. And there's a few settings here. I've got a pixel height of 1 and 1. Again, it's still absolute positioned. We have some type options that are also set. Oh, and should be overflow hidden. Overflow hidden. And then we have some type options that we can set up, because some people will set up like a no break or no wrap. And so what that does is, like, sometimes if something's awkwardly wrapping, it can affect the positioning, or it can appear, bizarrely when we're doing it. So we'll be like, there's a few things that we can add there. But the most important also is we want to put this as events none. We don't want this clickable. So it's here on the page. It's kind of hidden, but we don't want it clickable until somebody uses the keyboard. So if it means that it only happens on somebody using the keyboard tab, and so then it will appear, and it'll appear how we want it to. So I think that's it for the skip link. We all clear, and that all makes sense? Thumbs up will let me know. Perfect. I'm trying to go through this stuff as fast as possible and yet not miss anything. So that's what we so here we go. Let's pop in and see where we're going next. Okay. So when we're talking about we had this kind of idea that, okay, we've got our skip link. So this is kind of like our base level. So we've got our skip link. Now, what we can do with even just a simple test that you don't need any kind of testing device for or anything like that, is what we're going to check is we're checking to see if all of the links are in a tab order. Everything that we want to be tabbed is in a tab order on the site. And what that means is when you basically just take your tab key and you start tabbing through the site. And you can check to see if your tab order is correct, because every link will have, basically will go through the entire site all the way down. And you can also shift tab, which does it in reverse. So if you ever want to go back from a tab, that's how you would do it. The other thing I guess we should talk about right now is how do we make our tabs. So you get with different web browsers, we get different focus states. And so that's what this outline is here. This is a focus state. And so what we want to do is in Webflow, we can set that up real quick. So what we do is we take, just pop it, just pop anywhere here. Actually, I don't want to quite do it on this page. Try not to screw up my own. So let's do the test and build. Now this is kind of cheated because I've already done this. Let's go just pop into this example section and container. There we go. And I'm just going to pop in a text link here. And now with a text link, what we can do is we can go into our style selector and we can go all links. And so if we hit all links and then we go to that focused keyboard state, we can set a focused keyboard state on all of our links right off the bat. So yes, Chrome does, I think it does a black box around it. And sometimes people are like, oh, I hate that. That looks really ugly compared to the design that I made. So what we can do is we can be like, okay, well, I can now override that focus state and I can choose what I want to do that. One of the most common ones, instead of using borders, because what ends up happening is if you don't have the border height or whatever laid out, like say in a transparent or something like that, and you add a border to it, it actually changes the size of the element that you're dealing with. And so when we're talking about focus states, one of the popular ways of dealing with it is we use outline. Outline draws around the border of something. So it draws around the element and it doesn't affect the size. It is a visual cue that doesn't affect the size of the element. And so oftentimes we may have an offset. We can set our offset, like say we want it to 2 pixels or something like that. It's quite common if we will have a button or something like that we already have a nice border and we want it to look a certain way when we're when somebody's tabbing through. And I think the important thing to remember is people use keyboards quite commonly. So it's a visual cue that's not just a screen reader thing. It's something that is really helpful for people to know exactly what element that they're on, if they're on a link or something else like that. It's that visual cue, and we talked about it. It's not just a color change. There's an extra line around it when we do an outline or something like that. We'll also use underlines and standard things for links, just in general. So once we've done this, though, every link in our site is already covered. So now we have a focus state on every link that we've designed and that we basically have developed to be specific to our brand and everything else like that. And it really didn't take us very long. It was just like, oh, okay, now it's done. And then on top of that, when we get to other things, we may want to change that on that particular element because it's going to adopt whatever our all link style is. So like some of our buttons we may need to change, or the colors if we have different sets of buttons, and we can do all of that. But we do have a base style set up for every single link on our page. So we don't even have to think about it. We know that accessibility, we've added it. And right off the bat. So much like the skip link, it's like, oh, here's an easy thing I can do right off the bat to help make my sites more accessible. So it's kind of that no-brainer. And that's what we were seeing on this tab order, is we're seeing this focus state in action. Alrighty. Okay. Let's dive into landmarks. Now we're getting into some of the nitty-gritty of this. We already did the accessibility tree, and you might have seen some landmarks in the accessibility tree. So landmarks are important for accessibility because we can use assistive devices to navigate right to a landmark. They also let us know exactly what the page structure should be. And so when we have landmarks, we're talking about header elements, which is actually a banner landmark in aria or aria labeling. And so I guess let me take a step back. We're using HTML elements and tags in Webflow to create landmarks instead of adding roles or aria roles to things. Because the important thing with aria is you only use aria if you absolutely need to. The first rule of aria is don't use aria. Use the right HTML element or the right tool for the job. And so that is what Webflow allows us to do right out of the box. And how they let us do it is in a couple ways. The first one with landmarks is actually probably the simplest to show, and that is for this main wrapper here. We have these tags available to us. We have all of these tags, and what these are actually HTML tags. And so when we apply these HTML tags, they have properties to them. And so let's just take an example of the, if we just do a quick div here. When we look at a div has zero semantic meaning. We can't tell what is meant by a div. There is no accessibility in a div. There is no meaning in a div. But what we can do is we can assign this div meaning by adding a HTML element tag to it. So if we wanted this div to be a section, we would add a section to this. And what that does in our accessibility tree, I think we don't have time to go like running back and forth, is it will show section's a bad one, because I'm going to show you why in a second. Let's use this. We already have a main. But if we basically add this main tag to our div, it is going to make this our main section, or our main landmark. And so just by using these tags, we have a main, we have a footer, we have navs. So just by using these tags that Webflow provides us, we can create landmarks. And so I want to take a quick look at this. Let's go back to the test page. I guess I should just keep this test page handy. And I want to show you why. Let's go to, and I guess we're going to jump into screen readers because this is going to help us understand. So there's a bunch of different screen readers available. They all work similarly, not exactly the same. I use Narrator or NVDA. Narrator comes with Windows, so that's what I'm going to use, and I'm going to kind of show you what you can kind of do with it and why these landmarks become important. So we're going to go, I'm going to enter it here. You're going to be able to hear.
Narrator window, heading test and build, Google Chrome window, test and build document main landmark.
And so what
test
I'm
and build,
going to
accessibility and Webflow.
Is I'm going to be able to tab through.
Accessibility and Webflow home. Link, get clonable. Menu, button, collapsed, has pop-up. Breadcrumb navigation, link, accessibility and Webflow home. Link, test and build, current page.
So the other thing that when people are using screen readers, besides getting this information from the tabs, is they have access to how people with screen readers are going to be navigating a site. And so we can actually pull up.
Scan off. Search landmarks window.
The landmarks of a page.
Banner 1 of 3.
There we go. So I've got these landmarks available to me, and they show me what the landmarks are on a page. So I can go right to the breadcrumb.
Navigation landmark.
And so as we build in more landmarks, we're basically building a bit of a roadmap for people who are using assistive devices. And so that's kind of what I wanted to show in this. One thing that you'll notice is that there is no nav available because the nav is actually hidden behind the open button here. So when you have like a nav on desktop, if it's completely open, you'll have access to that.
Main landmark
With,
test and build.
with the, let's go here again.
Search landmarks window, search list.
So we have access to the things that we can see on the screen.
Scan off.
I have to keep dragging that over, I guess. And so we have access, and here's our main landmark.
Scan, main landmark.
And it's taking us right into the main landmark so that we can start interacting with what's in the main landmark, and we've skipped everything. That's basically what our skip link did for us, but it's another way that people can access it. And so when we're talking about landmarks on the page, we've got a couple things to talk about, and that is we have our banner, which is our header in Webflow. Our HTML element header is banner landmark, and in a banner, people are expecting things like a Navbar. There might be some extra information over top, like search or different things like that. That is what people expect in a banner. Then we have our main section, and then we have our content info or our footer. Content info is the aria name for it, for the landmark, and we use footer. So that's what we use. And we get all of this with Webflow just by adding those tags that I showed you before. One little gotcha with this, which I was learning about.
Accessibility.
Let's take that off.
Exiting narrator.
Okay. One of the little gotchas that I found when I was doing stuff with Webflow is I always thought when we built sections, oh, that was an accessible. It's not just a thing for us. It's an accessibility thing. Well, it is and it isn't, because the way it works is there's a few things that go on. I'm too big. This is bugging me. There we go. So sections have to have the next step, and that is they have to have either an aria label or an aria labeled by. And that gives the section meaning. Without the section having one of these things, the section has no meaning. It will not show up on the accessibility tree. So what that means is we can label sections. And again, I would say this is an extra step. If you want to go like, I'm going full accessibility mode, then you can apply this to sections. But just know that your section, just because you added a section tag, doesn't make it accessible just by adding that section tag. We need to do one of two things. So on the section itself, we can add an aria label. So if we go and aria label, maybe it should be doing a bit of a plus here. There we go. And I'm going to call this the why this works section. So now that I've done that, this section is actually going to show up in our accessibility tree. Another way that we can we do what aria-labeled by is we take so for instance this header, and we have an ID applied to this header, and then we go back to our section and we give it an aria labeled by. And of course, I forgot what the thing was. Learn and explore. So back to the section here. And it's learn dash explore. So now we have two different ways that we can identify sections. So if I publish this, on Webflow, there we go. And we go back to our test and build page. And I toss back our narrator in here.
Scan. Narrator window, test and build, Google Chrome window, test.
And I'm going to go into my landmarks, which
window,
in
search list, banner, scan, test and build.
That's not what I want to do. Let's do this again. I just wanted to be quiet for a second, but it wasn't going to. Try this again.
Landmarks window, search list, banner, 1 of 6, selected, scan off.
So here you can see we already have sections that we added just by adding in. I guess the section I added was not in the main, because this should be probably below this. But anyway, this creates a region that's a section, and it's an understandable section now because it has a name. And so this is what I was talking about. It doesn't exist in the accessibility tree if you don't add the section to it. But it's an extra step. One of the things that we also can navigate a site by is we can go by headings. So if I go
scan off
this way,
search headings window, search list, test and build page, 1 of 1, selected.
I can get all the headings of a page, and I can also navigate that way. So that's where, the section thing is like this extra piece that you can do. But as far as like the baseline of accessibility and stuff like that, it's not required. People can, if you have, and this is the other part when we're going to talk about is the HTML elements, is we're going to be talking about the using the headings and stuff like that. And oh my gosh, I've been talking for a really long time, and we're just not going to make it all in this. So I'm going to have to jump ahead and see what we can fit in. Yeah.
Before you sort of butcher what you've already had planned, we have a space next Friday where we haven't actually nailed down an event yet. So if you wanted to, we could split this into 2 parts, and
I think that would be if everybody is good with that. I think because I'm realizing how much time this is actually taking. So if we can do two-parters, and I'm going as fast, trying to go as fast as I can.
It's hard. There's a lot to cover, and you have to make sure people understand it. And it's, especially when things are new. So we totally get that. Um, is there anything else you want to cover today so that you've got enough
Yeah, I
time
think.
next week?
Well, I think Maggie, we're going to keep going because I think Maggie and I discussed that I knew we were going to be going over probably,
Mhm.
I estimate a half an hour. So we'll continue, and people can stick around or head out. And this is going to be, rewatchable anyway. So there is a ton of information to cover here. But hopefully, even just I just want to kind of go through some of these baseline things that we can do that right out of the box. What I wanted was people to take away is like you can instantly make your sites more accessible just by using some of the things that Webflow already provides. So let's kind of go through that baseline of things. I did want to catch the section thing because to me it was kind of a bit of a gotcha because I thought I was being accessible by using the section tag, and there's if you're not naming it, it's not accessible. The other thing, I'm just going to get rid of this right now,
Exiting narrator.
is I want to just explain a little bit of the difference between aria-labeled by and aria-labeled, and why some people might want to use one or the other. So the aria labels, they can be applied right to the section or things like that. So it might be easier to do. But if you're doing something in multiple languages or something like that, you might want to opt for aria labeled by, because when you're doing translation, the headings or the text on your page, those get translated. Attributes don't get translated. So you can change, and you can also change if your heading changes or something like that, that you have something, this aria labeled by, to give meaning to it. You don't have to go manually change the aria label. You can just be using this aria labeled by technique, which basically I think I went through really quick, but it's adding an ID to the thing that you want to basically be read out by the screen reader or assistive device. And so in this case, it's learn and explore, and that is what the section is going to be labeled for the landmark. Another one of the quick gotchas for, and it can happen, I guess it seems to have recognized, oh no, it hasn't. So, oh yeah, no, it did. Sometimes if you have a footer within another landmark, it doesn't actually recognize it. So that's another thing to be aware of, is like the way that your page should be structured is you should have a header element. This is another one that I actually thought we needed to add a header to, but if you have a navbar, a header is already included. So you'd be duplicating a header if you actually add a header tag to, say, a header div or something like that. But you want that to be separate from your main wrapper and your footer. So when you put these things on your page, these are going to be your main landmarks that you're going to be dealing with. And then when we get into the next one, which is the nav, so the nav itself, if we actually go into the navbar, and part of the way that I realized what was happening was by using the accessibility tree, I was able to see that I didn't have to add a banner, or there was one showing up twice because I was duplicating it in there. And so Webflow's navbar, which I highly recommend people use. I know people create custom navbars and things like that, but there are built-in accessibility parts of a navbar that, unless you know that you're replacing everything, you should not be using a custom navbar over a Webflow navbar. Now, they can be frustrating to use from a developer standpoint. And so the first thing, let's just pop in, let's go to our test and build page. That's what I'm on. Let's just throw a brand new Navbar in here. Not the header or page wrapper, sure. Let's just throw one where Control K. Nav. So once we have a brand new Navbar, we get things in Webflow that I have found as a developer become kind of a pain. So I strip it down really quickly. So I pull everything out of my container, and yeah, everything's out of my everything comes out of my container, and I get rid of that container, and then I make a new container. And this container doesn't have any of the pre-styles that anything else has. So I can design this container any way I want. And it still has all the functionality of a Webflow Navbar, because the important parts are the nav menu and the nav button. Those are the things that you want to be keeping. These are the things that Webflow has basically designed around. But so this one here, because I think I already have a nav container. Let's just see what I have here. Let's go. Okay, let's see what custom nav container is. That's not really great. Let's not do that. But I could add. Let's just go container large. Sure. I can add whatever container I want, and then I can structure my navbar however I want, because what you will find with the standard Webflow navbar is that sometimes if you want to do flex or you want to do different things inside of it, there's preset styles, and it has to do with the container itself. So once you get rid of that, you get rid of most of your problems with the standard Webflow navbar. So let's go pop over to navs. But what I didn't know is that there's actually two landmarks right within the Webflow navbar. So that's important, is the navbar container itself is actually the header. So you use the Webflow navbar, you actually get the header or the banner landmark. And then the nav menu itself, that's actually the nav. So if you go into settings, you'll see that it already has the tag of nav. The nav bar, we can't see it, which is something that might be a little bit maybe should be tagged, or maybe because Webflow doesn't want people messing with the fact that it's a header. But it's got the header tag on the nav. So those are two kind of really important things to know. That so we use a nav bar, we use a main content, and we use our content info. We have set up all of the main landmarks for our page for accessibility. And all we're doing is using a regular Webflow element and and two tags. Like, that's it. So again, not so complicated when you start thinking about it. And these things take seconds to kind of apply just by being able to know them. The other thing here is the last one was like the aside, and so sometimes that's like your sidebar. I don't use it very much in a lot of things that I do, but if you have like a sidebar that is complementary but can stand alone from the main content of a page, then you would use the tag aside with it, and then that content can be in that information. So you may use that one as well. I started exploring more with using some of these other ones that are available in tags. Like I think they have articles and addresses and different things like that. And address is kind of handy in forms and things like that, or in contact pages. But articles, as much as it was a good idea, we use something in Webflow that's actually a lot more powerful, and that is lists. So let's jump to the next bit, which is semantic HTML and aria. And I touched a little bit on this. Let's go here. jumping through. Keep in mind, you can go to this site and dig through all of this information. As I learn, I keep adding more information. And so this is what I was talking about, is like in Webflow, we have the ability to make really accessible sites just by using the things that Webflow allows us to use. And so when we're talking about that, we're talking about things like the Navbar. And then we're also talking about heading elements. Now, I touched briefly on the fact that we can navigate a site using only heading elements. And so it's important for those heading elements to really, set the roadmap or the picture for what a site looks like. And the way we do that is by using the proper H1 through H6 tags. Most people are probably using H1 through H4 on a site. I don't know many that use H6s anymore, but if you have that, it creates this standard hierarchy of things so that it's understandable. So when a screen reader reads it out, it will read out the heading, level, and then the title of whatever it is. And then so somebody can literally go through the page and be like, oh, well, I want that information. And so with that, they'll be able to understand a lot better what something is.
Narrator
so let's just take a
window,
quick
level 1.
look at that.
Welcome to Narrator. This is Narrator Home.
And,
Semantic HTML and ARIA. Accessible.
okay, and we're just going to go back to, where's our headings? F6.
Search scan off. Search headings window. Search list. Semantic HTML and ARIA. 1 of 1 selected. What is ARIA? 2 of 16 selected. Semantic HTML element. Heading elements. 4 of 16
not
selected.
showing the right screen here. There we go. So we get this list of all of the headings. And so that's why I was saying, like, the section thing, as far as creating extra landmarks, is kind of it can be an extra thing if you want to create that like ultimate accessibility. But we have different ways that we're navigating through a site with a screen reader or assistive device. And one of the ways is if we're labeling our headings properly and having the right hierarchy with them, people can go through the site and be like, oh, I just want to go.
47.
And it's going to take me directly
web designers
to whatever it was that I clicked on that I wanted to go to. So that's where the idea of is like, there's different ways, but we're creating these building blocks so that anybody that uses our site, whether they're using it with an assistive device or not, can navigate through it. So one of the checks that Webflow does do in the audit, I'll turn that off.
Exiting narrator.
One of the audits that Webflow does, and I probably added some stuff in here, but one of the tests Webflow does is they do heading level checks, and they check to see if the information is in a sequential order. So if basically we've skipped a heading, one thing that there should only be one H1 on a page. It's it's a standard practice. I think for sometimes the question was like, for sometimes people had like multiple H1s on a page. Now, obviously for SEO, it wasn't great, but like when we had these one page sites, it kind of became a common practice and people didn't really know. But the rule of thumb is have one H1 on your page, and then you can have multiple H2s or 3s and just have that hierarchy going down. But that's, headings are another way that people can go through a site. So that's the headings. The other thing to note with headings is it's not based on size. It's based on the HTML tag. And so when we're talking about that, if we go into Webflow, and Webflow, again, these are the things available to us that we can see right here is we can choose our heading levels right in here. Or if you are using some sort of system, you can adjust, and you can adjust the styles. Like for instance, this one here, I'm not sure what my regular H1 was originally, but I have it set to be a certain size with a class. And so let's just see what that is. So it was bigger than I wanted, but I wanted to ensure that it was an H1. So I have the heading tag, and then I add the class on top of it with the style that it is. And we might even have a heading that is our actual heading for our design. Maybe it's this small, but the size isn't always what's important, especially when we're talking about assistive devices, is we want the actual semantic HTML to dictate it. And so that's an important thing to look up when we're looking through another designer's designs or something like that. There may be eyebrows or different things that are like small, but those are actually logically the H1s or H2s or something like that. And so we need to just kind of be aware of it. Size is not the factor when we're talking about this. We want to use the right HTML tag. And Webflow also allows us to style all of the HTML tags in a certain way. And we use frameworks and different things, style guides for that kind of thing. But when we're talking about this, we want to make sure that our hierarchy is set up in a way so that we're using our headings. Size is not the determining factor, but the actual tag is. And we want them to be in sequential order. So that, because as you saw with the screen reader, that's how some people navigate easily through a website. I'm just going to change this back real quick. So the next thing that we're going to want to look at is link elements. Now we quickly went through and I showed you how to add that focus style to all link elements. And Webflow sometimes makes it confusing because we have link blocks and we have a button, which is actually an A tag, which is a link, not a button. And the big thing with links is links go somewhere. So this is when we're thinking about when we're using a link, even though, and that's where I found for a long time the ability of not having an actual button in Webflow was very confusing, or something labeled a button that wasn't actually a button. But they take you to files, pages, email addresses, locations. It can be on the same page or elsewhere. And so one of the things that we need to really differentiate is that links do those things and buttons do something on a page. So buttons take an action. So we want to just be really making the difference between what a link is and what a button is when we're talking with accessibility. And part of it is because buttons themselves actually have features. It's an HTML element that has built-in features that have accessibility properties to them that links do not have. And so when we're doing something that we want to be a button, and we want to click on a menu, and that is an actual button, we want to make sure that that's a button. When we push a modal, even though in Webflow we can style something as a button to open something, and we can change it with all of the IX, the animations and stuff like that, is we're not necessarily using all the functionality of a button. We're basically making a link do the work of a button. And so now with Webflow, we have the ability to separate them completely. We can use the HTML custom element and we can create buttons. And so if we're doing things that are in like carousels, or we're doing modals or things like that, we want to use the custom element button instead of the link for those kind of things. One of the other things that when we're kind of looking at links, I kind of, again, it's a new thing that I kind of started doing, and it might be something you have to kind of coax a client into doing, because some people might not be super excited about adding things. But when we're talking about anchor elements or links, if it's going within a page, like, or basically within a site, and we're not going out of a site, then we don't generally, that's the regular occurrence and the regular way that we use links mostly. But if we're taking somebody outside of a site, we want to make sure that we're adding in some information. So I'm just going to go back to that. Now, what you'll notice, unfortunately, through this is I learned as I went through this. So sometimes the documentation might be a little bit different from page to page, and one of these will probably be these external links because of the fact that I learned as I went. And one of the people that I was, one of the tricks that I picked up was using a font icon, and WebBay has a great tutorial on how to use font icons within a site, which I highly recommend, but I'm using it for a particular purpose. So if we take a look at this element here, I have a link. I have a few things happening here. So we have a link. This is actually going to an external source. So I have a font icon here that is visually indicating it's going somewhere else. So we're letting the user know that it's going somewhere else. And then we're also so in the link itself, I have this SR only. And what this SR only is, it's screen reader only. So this is only going to be accessed by a screen reader. And much like our skip link that we did earlier, this is visually hidden. Unlike the skip link, this isn't tabbable. This actually stays screen reader only. And I'll show you exactly what that looks like in a second, but I'm just going to take this off for a second. And I have this text span in here. So basically the idea was I highlighted a link, and then within the link itself, I added a span. So I have my span added in here. And then I added the screen reader only class to that. And oh, did I just hide everything there? No. Oh yeah, because I'm not in my span, that's why. And this is why live is fun. Okay, and let's do it there. And I'm adding that. And so only the screen reader is going to be able to recognize it. This is where a visual user is only going to be able to see this. And so let's just see what that sounds like here. Let's go and
Scan. Narrate.
Let's go here.
Semantic HTML and aria. Accessible.
What am I doing? I'm tabbing.
But aria region, link, MDN web docs open in new tab.
So it's indicated that it's opening in a new tab for just the screen reader. And there's the visual cue. So if we are sending people outside, this is the most accessible way of doing it. The other thing that you'll notice is like there's a visual cue here that this is a link, and that is using the underline. And so we have that set up, and on hover it disappears. So somebody knows right off the bat that this is a visual cue, that it's a link. And then we have this icon on the side that basically says this is, and this again.
Main landmark.
Oh, I'm on the wrong thing again here. Let's go back here. This is just a span, another span, and this is all within a paragraph. And I've just set the font icon to this span, and I've pasted the icon in here. And that means that I can do anything I want to this particular icon. I can change the color, I can style it however I want, set the sizing. So, maybe I want it a little bit smaller or something like that. I can do that. But now I have this link set up so that no matter who's using the site, they understand that this link goes outside. And so that's an important part for accessibility, is because people are expecting links in general to go into parts of your own site. And so you want to give an indication that if you're taking somebody out, anytime that you're doing something that a behavior that, you know, somebody needs to know it's going to a new tab, then that indication needs to be made there. Otherwise, a new tab could open and maybe somebody wouldn't know. So that's another tip there. Alrighty. So, oh yeah, let's go into links. Now we're going to talk about, I think one of the parts that I would really love Webflow to be able to do, and that is part of it is with CMS. Because right now, this is a bit of a convoluted way of adding. So links have to have descriptive content to them. So what that means is if we go into, where are we at? Yeah, we're in semantic HTML aria. I'm going to go back to the screen reader.
Scan. Narrator window heading level 1. Semantic
I'm going to go right
HTML
into
aria
here.
region, link MDN web docs. Link. Text link 1 opens in new window.
So I've indicated that this text link is going to open in a new window.
Link, text link 2.
Now, this is the link that is being labeled by just what the content is.
Link, company home.
So this is quite common in a Navbar, is you might have that.
Semantic HTML and aria, main landmark.
Okay.
Aria region, link,
And this is why using the
Exiting
screen
narrator.
reader live can be a little bit tricky. But so for this one here, what we're actually doing is we're adding something we're adding an aria label to it to be able to tell where this is going. So we're overriding. Now sometimes it can pull the info from the image, but I like to just apply it right to the link itself. And I'm just adding an aria label, and this is telling it, we don't have to write in an aria label. We don't write link because it's already recognized in the screen reader. As we could hear, it says it's a link, but we're telling it what it is. So when somebody is clicking on, a logo at the top of the screen, they know that that's taking them to home. And yes, it's kind of a standard practice, but if you're using a screen reader, you don't necessarily know what that is. So it's really designed for assistive devices. And then, so going back to when we go into the CMS, so you'll see here, this is quite common. We have a list, and we have CMS information that needs to be in here. But what ends up happening is if you go through this with a screen reader, we have, visually when we're looking at this, we can see that, okay, this button goes with this heading, right? Visually, we can kind of make that match. Well, when you're using an assistive device, you don't necessarily have that, because as I showed you before, one of the ways that people can go through a site is they can actually go through every single link on a page. And so if we don't give them information, and their information is coming from, generally a link gets its meaning from what is written in the link. So if you notice when we're talking to, in paragraphs, we highlight a full chunk of text that gives an indication of where the link is going, because we want to be very descriptive of where that link is going to take somebody to, so they have an understanding of what that is. Same thing with things like our buttons or our links, is we want to be descriptive of where that goes to. Now, if it's pulling its meaning just from the text, what's going to end up happening is, in a section like this, in a CMS, a bunch of people are going to have, all the links are going to say the same thing. Learn more, learn more, learn more, learn more, learn more, or whatever is on repeat pretty much. And so there's a couple of ways we can do it. We can create a field that is specifically tells us, what something is for. We can aria. The problem with it with CMS is we can't set an aria label for just one item. Once we set the aria label for this, it will basically run it through the whole CMS. We could create a field for it. What we really want to do, and I hope Webflow kind of adopts this in future, is the ability to add dynamic information and static information to an attribute. So then we could do aria-label is whatever this information is statically, and then what it is dynamically. So I think I can just show this better. So what I've done is I've created a div block and I've wrapped static text, and then I'm pulling in dynamic text basically from this title, so that when somebody goes through the what's actually going to get read out is they're going to get the learn more, because that's the standard, what's visual in there. One thing when you are talking about accessibility, depending on the levels that we want to go with it, is we want to be talking about just the visually, we probably do want to give more information than just learn more. Sometimes, depending on the design, it's not possible. So this is a way that we can add on some extra accessibility so people have an understanding if they're using assistive devices and don't have the visual cues. And so in this div block, I've used the SR only, so I'm using it screen reader only, and I'm using this static text and this dynamic text, and this will read out learn more about 14 common misconceptions about web design. The next one is going to learn more about this, and so that's what's going to get read out. And so now we've added context to what this actual link is going to do. So, and I think we are at time. Just see if there's anything else. I did go over this, the button element, and yeah, I think we can stop there at the next one, which will be lists.
Right. Eugene had a question. Thanks for this. It's really useful. I found that a lot of accordions are not built with accessibility in mind. What would you recommend to perform to check their accessibility? We can either cover this now, or that might be something you were planning to cover next week anyway. So.
Yeah, so Eugene, stick around. We are going to be going through that because I want to invite people to get acquainted with the details HTML element. So it does a lot of the things that we kind of expect with an accordion, and we can do things with it. Well, it basically works like an accordion. We can make it work the same way, but it's accessible right out of the box by using, again, it's using the right tool for the right job. So it's using that HTML element, which is already existing, which is a details element. And so now that we have the ability to use custom elements in Webflow, we can start to make use of all of these really great HTML elements. And I will show how to do that specifically next time.
Excellent. Wonderful. Thank you. My gosh, there is so much, obviously, for us all to learn and to understand how Webflow already makes a lot of this possible more easily than trying to figure out a way around the limitations. Is really helpful to know. And I think this is going to be really useful for a lot of people. So thank you very, very much, Jeremy, for spending this time with us. And we look forward to next week being able to sort of work through the rest of it. And I know that the things that we can see coming up are things that probably most people have struggled with or just given up on trying to make accessible. So thank you.
Yeah, I think one thing I would just take away basically everything that we've kind of covered here covers a lot of the initial issues with accessibility. And if you just apply one of these, apply a couple of these things. And I know I talked a lot because I'm trying to explain it, but it doesn't take that long. Like, just do these very simple things and you will make your sites more accessible than a lot of the sites out there. And sometimes when we're dealing with Webflow, we look at what the visuals are with something, and there's ways of structuring things also in a way that we can make the most beautiful looking sites, but they can also be accessible.
And I think that's really good for us all to know. Excellent. Thank you very much once again. And folks, we will see you next Friday at 12 o'clock Eastern for more accessibility and Webflow. And otherwise, actually, yes, I'm going to just say next week. It might be 2 weeks. I have to just go back and check. Anyway, we will let you know. And in the meantime, give some of this stuff a try and follow us at No Code North on all the socials, and visit our website at nocodenorth.com and sign up for our mailing list, and then you'll know when the next time we're going to talk about this is. Anyway, thank you so much, and we'll see you around. Bye-bye.